when conflicts happen, one of the reasons that people are selecting self-directed education as an option or as the option is because when conflicts happened in their previous education, it didn't turn right. A lot of people are choosing self-directed education spaces because of their conflict resolutions, their approach to conflicts. My name is Sonia, and along with David, Annie, and Crystal, we are exploring a bit of what's happening in their own lives and the lives of their centers when conflicts happen. And in these first moments, I'm going to invite each of you to introduce yourself and also through your organization, through your community. So I'm starting from my right to my left, and Crystal, you're first.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Crystal Bird Farmer. I run Gastonia Freedom School, which is an agile learning center, and we have mostly kids who are autistic or have ADHD. And I'm also a diversity consultant, and we're in North Carolina. And what else should I say? Is that good? We have conflict often between kids just because of sensory differences or differences in how they want to play. And then, the adults also have their, are bringing their expectations to the center and what they want. And then, I manage conflict in my own personal life, and I've been learning lots of things about that as well. So yeah, I'm excited.
Thank you. Annie, you're next.
Hi, I'm Annie Friday. I am in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I run a flying squad and am co-founder of Blue Bridge ALC here, a group agile learning center, community-based unschooling. And I have 2 children of my own who are engaged in unschooling and not in conventional school.
David?
Hi, I'm David. I'm a facilitator at the Village Free School, Portland, Oregon. I'm also doing flying squads with Bria in Portland. Conflict is part of life. It's normal. I'm here to talk about that and how normal it should be, I guess, or normalized. I do conflict all the time with everybody. Thank you.
This is exactly the next question. So when we say conflicts, some of the people immediately think about fights. Some other people think about boundaries. Some of the people actually see them as opportunities, and some of the people they see as co-regulation. When thinking about conflicts, how do you personally define it? And I'm saying this because all the layers of each culture are influencing how we see conflicts. So we may see it, I will see them as a Romanian, but I will see them also as Sonia, also as a green schooler, and also as my, let's say, things that I follow and I support and I want to be. So what is your own understanding of conflict? And maybe make a comparison with how your organization sees conflict. And we can take the same order.
So I see conflict as any kind of misalignment between what people want. So that means that conflict can happen at all kinds of ways and in different levels, but it doesn't always mean that it's a bad thing. Sometimes it's just different values, different expectations, different desires, and it's okay if one party can't meet those expectations or desires, and that means a conflict is showing us something that's important to know about what's going on in a situation. Our center sees conflict kind of at a bigger thing, like there's always going to be like misalignments with what's going on, but if it's a conflict and it's something that is happening where there's distress going on, where one of the kids or one of the facilitators is upset and what I call like distress is like there's a need that needs to be met. So they need to be comforted. They need something to change. They need to say something and speak up about what's going on. So that's when we consider it a conflict that we need to intervene in or actually kind of guide the kids towards some kind of resolution with when there's some upset happening.
Annie?
Yeah, yes to everything Crystal said. I have been reflecting on this, trying to mentally prepare for this, my role here. And I will say something that's come up a lot this weekend is how much unschooling is in conflict with societal norms right now, right? And so it's not really when conflict comes up, it's as conflict comes up because we expect it, right? Whether it's just our neighbors questioning our choice or something specific to our environment, like a need needing met. And thinking about it, Sonia, as you said, like as who we are, I think for me, the work has been in recent years really taking a look at what whiteness does to problem solving and conflict resolution and some of the more conventional ways conflict is handled in group, especially in group learning environments, right? Schools, conventional schools, things like that, and how we're doing it differently in practice in our center and in our family. So, yeah.
David, natural, you said. Can you go deeper in your own definition?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out if there was anything new I could add, but to me, conflict is just a process of finding truth. It's the way I would imagine the way nature deals with conflict and the way it weaves in and out. And so I guess that is how I see conflict. Maybe that's, I think from our center's point of view, it's very much similar to what Crystal said, was just like what need is being met or isn't being met and what we can do to support, do they need to be comforted? And I think it is not, when I say conflict is about finding the truth, I don't mean it's like a solution, like it's not solution based. It's about a greater wholeness. And I know I'm probably being really out there with this, but yeah, I'm just trying to explain my version. And I also just got here and this is my second cup of coffee, so I'll get there.
Thank you. Just to better understand each other's context and just to understand what you are dealing with or what you are embracing every day. Story time. Tell us about your conflicts in your organizations in the last week or so. Were they hot conflicts? Were they cold conflicts? Were they between adult or adult children or children, conflicts between children? How did they look like? What made you smile or what made you to be in awe of them being in conflicts or solving conflicts? How do conflicts look like in your center? And for this one, you start when you have the stories.
Okay, I have two stories. Is that okay? Okay, so one of the stories, so my mom is the other facilitator at our center, and she and I are both very plain spoken people. Like, I mean, we say whatever's on our mind. And there was one of our kids brought, I don't even know what they had for lunch, but whatever he brought to lunch, my mom looked at it and was like, that's junk food. And so he shared that with his mom, who ended up calling and was like, why did you call his food junk? And so my mom apologized and was like, well, it's just expressing an opinion. So that was a conflict with a parent, and kind of, I don't think there was anything bad going on. It was just kind of my mom expressing her opinion about the food in a way that probably was not like ideal, but still it was just her opinion. And the parent, rightly so, saying like, why are you calling my kids food junk? So anyway, they were able to have a discussion about what kind of foods to bring to the center, and then what, how to express opinions in a better way. So that was one conflict. The other one that was going on last week was relating to the kids that I facilitate are kind of in late elementary, middle, and high school, and they get along pretty well, but there's one student who drops in and he doesn't quite have the same alignment with the other kids as far as what he wants to do during the day. And so he's always saying, well, let's do this. And the other kids are kind of like, since they're there full time, they have their routines and they have what they like to do. And they're kind of like in their zone doing things. And he's kind of bringing things up and he's saying, let's do this. And they don't want to do it. And he's getting frustrated. He starts yelling. Sometimes he gets into fights with the other kids where he is provoking them intentionally. And that's kind of something that for me is looking like, okay, this kid is not getting his needs met as far as like what he wants to do when he's at the center. And so for me, I'm trying to help him understand like, okay, they're not doing what you want them to do, but that's okay because you can't control them. You have to control, what you can control, which is yourself. And you can choose to do other things. And then when you're frustrated, there's other ways to work out that frustration and to do things so that you feel better. And it's a work in progress, just trying to help him understand how to self-regulate, but also to communicate with these kids in a way that helps them understand him and what his needs are too. So.
Thank you. Whoever has a story can open the mic and share.
Conflict is such a part of our daily. We have children as young as 4 and up to like 16 young people, 16 years old. So conflict comes up, whether it's, just over a material. Like I can't think of a specific example from the last week, but every day something happened. So yeah, it's also for us, a big part of it is observing the conflict and knowing when, like, really it's kind of a nuanced skill of when to step in, when you notice that they might need some support from an adult or another person in the room. It doesn't have to be an adult. Some conflicts, pass in a moment and it's cleared up and you move on. This week, actually, one example might be like our flying squad had a conflict that kind of had been lingering over a few weeks. And so we chose to sit down and talk it out a little bit. And we had to put some communication around some things that were happening. And yeah, we just had to slow down and reflect on it together as a collective and kind of share how each one of us was experiencing it, because I think that's such an important piece of it too, is the conflict is experienced completely differently from each person who's involved in it, right? And so often we have multiple parties who feel really personally wronged or harmed, and we have to kind of sort that out and listen to each other and share our perspectives and figure out a way to move forward or move, away from each other, at least for the moment, and giving the space to reflect on that. I don't think I have a specific story though.
The story time doesn't necessarily need to be very specific. Also thinking about the privacy of the people involved. But if you have a story, or if you have the types of conflict that happen and you can share them, this can help us to ask better questions and to understand where you're coming from and what you're living on a daily basis. So if you want, you can continue. And if not, maybe David, you have a story to share.
David, you're a good storyteller. Tell a story.
I don't feel very good at telling stories right now, I guess. But it's funny because I was like, where do I start? This whole coming, I don't want to say coming out of the pandemic, but it does feel a little bit like we're more together, has brought up a lot of stuff that just trying to figure out as a community. And what I mean by community is students, parents, facilitators, people on the peripherals. How do we like come together and, come together as a community with still trying to take care of people's needs or concerns about COVID kind of thing. So that's one especially high on the list. And realizing that you try to move on as much as possible. You try to listen to everything, and you're always, you might not get it right. And trying to, I think conflict can sometimes, within that sphere, it's hard to know how to stay in community. And we try very hard to rely on our conflict resolution processes, which is like very mediation based. We have ombuds people to, in case someone has a problem with facilitators, they have somebody to talk to. And so we try to, that's our way. Like I think we probably talk about conflict as very natural. We try to normalize it within the community because that's when things are the most vulnerable. So there's that. And there's also been like a lot of conflict within the staff, especially by me sometimes. And just trying to take breaks as we can. And yeah, one of the things is like conflict has made me understand myself more. I think realizing more now that I'm on the spectrum, I don't understand all my emotions as they come through. Like I don't know how to voice them, and has made me kind of like see how other kids who are on the spectrum also deal with that. Like it's never just going to be like, everyone experiences conflict differently, but also everyone voices it differently or can't voice it the same way. And trying to move through that, seeing how I do that, and what I would like for mediation to look like, and how, trying to mirror that with other kids too. Sorry, I'm being very generalist. I don't really have specific, because I feel like I could go on a rabbit hole with this. But yeah, that's what I thought of the most.
Thank you. Before going to how we approach conflicts, how we solve them, and conflict resolution strategies in your organizations, I would want to pause a bit moments before. And my question here is, how do you create a safe space for conflicts to happen and to prevent them becoming toxic or harming more than learning opportunities? How do you create that safe space? Is it maybe a specific set of principles that is printed everywhere? Is it mindfulness sessions every morning? Is it nonviolent communication? Is it a committee that is in charge of judging behaviors? What type of approach do you have for conflicts to happen in a safe space, and for them just to explore their own unmet needs through conflicts? Whenever you feel like ready to answer, you can open your mic.
Well, I don't think we formally use any of those things. There's, I think what since most of our kids are autistic or ADHD, what we do a lot of is just naming what's there. And like, if somebody's showing feelings, naming, okay, they seem pretty upset, they're crying, this person is mad, this person's sad. this person's screaming and we don't know why, kind of just naming what's going on in this space. And that creates an awareness in general of people just maybe not, I don't know if they would not be aware of the emotions or what's going on, but I'm assuming that sometimes they aren't aware of what another kid is feeling. And so naming that brings that awareness up, and it helps to just be aware, and then to notice. And then I find the kids having conversations about why this kid is doing this, or why they said that, or what the expectation was, or they're working things out among themselves, and that's just because they already have that awareness. And that's been, I think, the most intentional thing that I do. Like, I don't intentionally use nonviolent communication. I think you had Mindachi here, right? So there was some talk about decolonizing nonviolent communication, and I find it really helpful just to be kind of clear on what is happening without using a lot of formal language for the kids.
I agree, Crystal, with you on that. Like, I think we just try and keep it as simple as possible, and narrate it when it's helpful, and notice it, maybe name it if it's appropriate. Again, I think like normalizing discomfort and normalizing things like tears, like I think like, and we've talked about this in our center sometimes, like if there's an adult who's not used to our space, sometimes we fear that like sometimes if we know a person who's crying is a crier, like I myself, I'm a crier. Like if I hear certain people's tears, I don't jump up and run to them, right? Like I let that play out. And that can be really alarming to some adults, and really kind of an atypical thing for adults to do in a shared space with young people. I usually will listen a little bit closer, or kind of keep my eye on that situation from where I am, but I don't necessarily move my body into their space and insert myself into their conflict until I'm invited. I think so much of it is that patience, like knowing that that's the deprogramming I have to do, is like, it's not my job as the grown-up in the room to solve everyone's conflicts. It's to hold space for it and be there as needed. But it's usually like right when I'm compelled to jump in eventually that like the solution happens. And I'm like, all right, I'm about to do it, but I can back off now. And they figured it out on their own. And sometimes it's even just saving space, like Flying Squad, usually we save a few minutes at the end to just be like, hey, what happened today? What came up? Do we need to talk anything out? And sometimes there are things that have come up that I didn't witness that we can kind of talk out as a group for a couple minutes, whether it be, something that happened, like a stranger approaching somebody, or something happened between them. But yeah, and just following up, sometimes conflict goes home with kids that I didn't see or witness, and then I'm approached about it by a parent. And that can be really hard for me, because the parent usually comes in kind of a way that's like, how did you let this happen? And why didn't you tell me about this? And a lot of times it's because I don't know. And so we have to talk to our families and our parents about how we let conflict happen, right? Like real world conflict, not just school created conflict. Like, I was in a conversation last week with a parent who wanted their child to join Flying Squad because they wanted their child to experience real world conflict. However, I had asked for a call with the child or with the young person to explain to me why they wanted to be part of Flying Squad. And instead, the parent came on to explain to me why they wanted their young person to be part of it, because they thought it would create more conflict in their home if they let their young person have that conversation. And it was like kind of this like so you won't handle conflict in your own home, but you're signing them up for this program to let them find conflict. And like, we have to be allowing it to naturally unfold in our natural spaces where we exist with kids, where we exist with our young people in community, whether that's our home or our learning centers or our homeschool co-ops, or wherever you are learning and existing in groups of people.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback a little bit on that pausing thing. I think, yeah, or people feel the need to go in and jump in and try to find what is the thing that's happening, and observing is a huge part of, I think, of putting finding a safe space, I guess you could say, or making a safe space. For our center, we don't also use particular formulas or anything like that. I really believe in listening first, and checking your own reaction before you jump into anything. And sometimes, it's that adultist way of finding a solution. You want to jump in when the kids are actually finding it themselves, and that's their way of learning through conflict. And all you do is facilitate, whether it's if it's going sort of in a harmful direction or not. And sometimes we also have to check ourselves, what is harmful, or what, kind of like what you were saying, Annie, about I also react to tears in a way like that. So check yourself before you wreck yourself. Anyway, so I really feel, I don't know, the thought of a safe space though is interesting. We recently did a podcast with with Bria and Kathy, who also facilitates at my center. And it's almost like you can't really create a safe space. You can create I hate this word too, but it's the only one we could find, is a resilient space where you're there to work on being with other people. The safe space idea is almost like nothing bad is going to happen. It's almost like a misnomer. It's interesting because it's I feel like sometimes parents send their kids to us thinking that there will be safe from outside parts of the world. And yes, in many ways, yeah, we don't do tests, we don't do grading. However, we're still human beings. So, and we're still affected by everything else out here. Yes, thank you, Bria. And yeah, I think it's just we're just a group of people doing a thing, and so trying our best, and it's gonna be messy. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Something I'll probably chat. I'll put on the chat.
David, your check yourself before you wreck yourself comment makes me think about just how much work, the work is on us as adults and grownups in the space to make sure that we know those agitation points, those triggers, those hot buttons that we have, and do that work ahead of time. And just, yeah, being aware of your own reactions in the moment, but also trying to proactively root those out before the moment so that it doesn't come up. And but having outlets for ourselves too, right? We have outside space that I can take myself out to as needed when I need a breath of fresh air, right? We have our own coping mechanisms, whether it's noise canceling headphones, because, a source of conflict might feel bigger if I'm also bothered by the noise in the space, things like that accommodate us as the grownups in the space to react more appropriately as the grownups in the space.
That's funny you say that, because I've recently been putting some earbuds in, playing some very low volume dubstep while the kids are running around crazy, and I'll turn it up a little bit when I feel like I need to get that peace of mind. Yeah, I listen to dubstep.
That's a good point too. The physical space is another way of managing conflict, and saying, okay, you can go down this way, or you can go outside and play, or you can put in headphones. We have a chill room that's specifically for that. Just if you're bothered by all of this, just go in there and hang out.
I will move now from before the conflict. What can we do to for lack of a better word, I would say prevent, but that's not the point, as I hear you. But I do switch to when conflicts happen, during conflicts. What are what are the approaches that your centers are using, and then putting it in a plural because maybe you consider different strategies for the same community. One size fits all, maybe not. It's not fitting your own community, no matter how big or small it is. What's happening during a conflict? How do you approach a cold conflict in which people are avoiding each other and they are not talking and they are refusing communication, and the others are influenced by this? And how do you approach a hot conflict in which it may escalate? And there is a question in the chat: what do you do also if there is a chronic conflict, so a long-term one? And I will add to this: what do you do when there's a conflict that gets toxic and becomes bullying? So what are the approaches? What are the strategies that you're using? The conflict resolution in your center.
I would say a couple of strategies we use. We do have the sit down meetings where we have everybody around and we just like talk it out and just say, okay, what's going on? You know, what's your perspective? What are you feeling? What are you needing? You know, what's the other one's perspective? There may be multiple perspectives often, you know, and try and come up with a resolution that way. And then a lot of times I'll just let it kind of, I'll let it play out and see what the kids come up with, because we have tweens and teens, and a couple of them are very emotionally like intelligent and are able to say what's going on, what they need, and then to work it out among themselves. So I try and encourage that when they do it. And then another method would just be to take each one alone and say, you know, what's going on? How are you feeling? What do you need? And then encourage them to speak that up to the other person or to whatever situation it is. And instead of them running to me saying, okay, I'm hearing you, but can you go and tell this to the other child that you're in conflict with? So very rarely do we like step in and say, okay, you're doing this and you're doing this, and that's the end of the conflict, because that doesn't really work. So I think that works for the cold conflicts and the hot conflicts. For a long-term conflict, it's really important just to know whether it's like a difference in needs or whether it's really something that's not going to be compatible with being in this space. So we've definitely had kids who are creating conflicts, and overall it's because they're not a good fit for the space. But there are also times when it's just like they're expressing something that they need or that's not working for them, and we can kind of figure out how to adjust it so that everybody gets their needs met.
I was thinking of a long-term conflict where our strategy is to, you know, continually check in. We during staff meetings, we like, you know, put their names on there. It's like, okay, well, what's going on here? It feels like it's still very raw, very, you know, there's still a lot of conflict going around these students. So we make plans to like check in with them. And then like at last we check in with parents, because oftentimes it's maybe the culture of like the home culture and how they themselves deal with conflict is how it's going to transfer to how the kids deal with conflict. And, you know, having like a conference in that way is very helpful. And usually that works out well. But sometimes it's like, it's not like they create conflict and they can't be in the space, but it's just like their way of viewing conflict is incompatible with ours, and so they kind of let themselves out. You know, they leave themselves. Like, yeah, you know, we're going to this other school, but and that's happened recently. But might even not. Yes. Just that's one strategy. Constantly checking in. I've never heard of cold or hot conflict. Sorry, so I had to think about that.
Yeah, those are new terms for me too. I like those. I think the cold conflicts that are long-term are where mediation can really help. I think like my job as a flying squad facilitator has often been like a mediator. And sometimes it's, if there are two people or multiple people in a conflict, sometimes it's having conversations with each party like on their own first to kind of understand their perspectives, and even just maybe sharing a little bit more from my perspective can create that shift that's needed to get over the hump of the conflict. Sometimes it starts there, and then it's a conversation that we're all part of, and we're like not a safe space, but more of like the resilient space that David was talking about, or brave space, I've heard it called, where people feel at least like we've created enough safety that they can be brave and voice their actual fears, needs, whatever's coming up from that conflict. David makes a great point about sometimes it's a home culture issue too. And we've had to dig in, especially with some of our younger learners, when they take something home like, oh, this friend of mine's always hitting me or always kicking me. And sometimes parents don't naturally know how to support that without just saying, well, don't let them do that. Like you kick them back, or you just don't play with that kid. So it kind of can create a narrative. Like some of our 5-6-year-olds are the ones that we see this happening with the most, where like kind of a narrative's been created at home then, and they say, so-and-so is not my friend, because they kick me. When like I've seen the whole conflict from start to finish, and I've seen two kids playing with each other, and play just got a little too hot and heavy, and maybe one kid's bigger or one kid's more assertive with their body or their voice. And so it's not necessarily like a mismatch of power, but one person gets hurt a little bit more. So then they come back with this narrative from home of like, I'm not supposed to play with that person anymore. And so it's a conversation to start it's at our center, but then also to continue back to the home life and be like, actually, that's not how we do it here. We have to stay curious as the grownups and ask more questions and find out, it takes a lot for something to go to bullying. In my opinion, I think bullying is a little bit more like systematic. I think it's repetitive. I think it's hard to do in our types of group learning facilities because we're so present with the kids and we haven't created that hierarchy of power, hopefully, that kind of creates bullies.
We remain at this topic when conflicts happen. We don't move after, because there are two questions in the chat. First of all, what are you doing when the child is in a conflict with the parents that are not quite on board or supporting the young people to resolve their own conflicts? So what do you do with this? And the other question, so you answer which one you want or both, how you are approaching restorative practices when harm happens? What does accountability look like?
That first question, I'll say, sometimes it comes down to a direct conversation. Well, often it comes down to a direct conversation with the parents, guardians, caregivers of the family to say, like, this is what we are and this is how we handle things. If you can't get here with us, then maybe this isn't the right space for you and your family. Like, we can welcome any young person into our space and figure it out with them, but sometimes it's just adults are too far set in their ways or whatever to come all the way on board to make it work. Other times it's just a conversation that they didn't understand that. And it's gone both ways when we have those really like raw conversations of like, here's how we're seeing it and this is who we are, and really identifying our values as a community learning space. And we've had it, both ways. Some people leave from those conversations and some people come back with a renewed commitment to understanding more what we're working on and what we're working towards as a community. And I think the restorative, the restorative part, I think it's very natural to think that like kids need to learn through certain things, like, but they're humans just like us, and we learn in relationship with each other, and sometimes those relationships move at different speeds, and we can't force restoration. We can't force the feelings that sometimes we think of that go along with I'm sorry, right? Like you can't force those moments of recognition. It's allowing the conflict to take up the space as it needs, like letting it kind of be a living, breathing thing. And sometimes it's big in a room and you kind of have to live with it sometimes, similar to grief, like it's its own space. And you can't force people to resolve conflict if they're not ready to resolve conflict.
I always think of restorative practices like restoring relationships. And when something has been harmed, when you've been harmed or something's been harmful, the relationship might be okay. You might work out the kinks and figure out what has actually happened, but the wound is still there. It's still fresh. So you're never truly going to, like, I feel like sometimes maybe we think that restoration means that it's all good. Like, I think of trauma, like trauma happens when things haven't been talked about or put out in the open and discussed or felt. It's been pushed down and it creates a bigger trauma effect, I guess, or at least complex. But yes, prayers and shame. And but yeah, I don't know, that was the first thing I thought of was like, I had recently had a conflict with somebody and we both reacted defensively, and it wasn't because they said anything to me that was particularly harmful, or I said anything but we just reacted defensively just because of our histories with other people. And that's going to come up with also like school wounds, you know, kids that come through school and they have these school wounds and sometimes we're not the center to deal with how traumatic those school wounds were, you know, and sometimes I feel like we're highly underfunded in that way. We want to meet with therapists and other people who can help these kids through them, but they don't understand our model or what we do or how we work through it. Much slower, much more, like you said, breathing. So yeah, sorry.
No need to apologize. Crystal, is there anything you want to add on the two questions?
I think they both made good points. Like the conflict doesn't always naturally come to a place of restoration and accountability. And I'm not about forcing that on the kids. And then a lot of times parents' ideas of accountability looks like punishment, which is not really what we're about. So I think we've always had the conversation with parents when they come and they're like, oh, well, he hit him or he, said this. And so, what are you going to do about it? And we said, okay, so we've had the conversation with the kid and now it's up to the kid to decide what they're going to do about it, how they're going to fix it. And sometimes they don't want to fix it. And, that's on them. And that's how they learn about how relationships work and how you actually, how you harm somebody and you see the results of that harm. And then you have to decide within yourself, do I want this relationship to be restored or do I not? How much do I care about what's going on with this? And, since it's a small space, we have like 17 kids, they're usually going to want to restore that relationship, but it may take time. And the other kid may still need their own time to come around and say, okay, I'm actually okay playing with you again. So it takes time. And like David said, sometimes it means that the parents are not okay, with how we do it. So.
Moving forward from the exact moment when the conflict happens, how do people, adults or children or teens in your space, go back to the well-being state of mind? Is it through help? And if it's with someone's help, is the child, is it an adult? Is it with apologies or even language apologies? Is it with debriefing? Is it with a specific space, a calming space? Is there a technique, or is just the child choosing what to do next, or is a mix of whatever happens or whatever they feel it can happen? How is it for you? How do people go back to the well-being phase?
It's like D, all of the above. Like, I mean, I think that's why we do the work with ourselves and the young people we work with proactively, right? We teach breathing techniques. We teach about how to just name emotions. We teach how to recognize emotions in others. We learn those things together. And a lot of checking in. We've had a few really big moments of conflict that have been when like a young person maybe gets upset and starts destroying property more than anything else, like tearing apart a room or kicking a trash can across the room, which can feel really scary in the moment if you're just an innocent bystander who didn't see it coming, who wasn't part of it. So it's following up with those people too, like who else was there, who else needs to like have their perspective heard on what happened here. Because conflict often spills over beyond who's just directly involved with it. And, I think it's just really being aware, and like, it's such a nuanced thing to like, we're in relationship with these people, sometimes every day, sometimes, once a week, whoever they are. But it's an ongoing relationship and it's an ongoing conversation. And like you said, sometimes we get it wrong and sometimes we have to revisit, and sometimes, or often maybe we get it wrong. I think for young people who have come to us with school wounds, the most impactful thing for them has been allowing their conflict to show, like letting that kid kick the trash can across the room and not getting mad at him for that, or not punishing him for that, or coming down harder on him. We earned a lot of trust that day. Like he was like, oh, you're not going to yell at me for that. I'm like, no. And let's talk about it when you're ready. Like one of our first weeks of operation, we had somebody have a really big reaction to something, and they were kind of threatening to leave our campus, our property, and they walked outside, and I just walked outside with them, but stayed, maybe 100 yards away. Like I could see them, they could see me. And I think that alone was like, you're not going to chase me. You're not going to force me to come back in this building. You're not going to tell me what I need to do with my anger right now. And that was like a huge moment for both of us in like establishing that trust and being like, all right, they let me have my feelings here. And that young person has, because of that, had fewer and fewer instances. Sometimes we see what we call like kind of an extinction burst, where behaviors will pick up before they die off. And so we just are present and hold space for that too. It's almost like a test of trust that happens subconsciously, I think, like, how far can I push you? Will you still be here for me? And as long as it's not really hurting our community in toxic ways, we can be patient with that and through that.
I immediately thought of something, a particular story. We have a kid who definitely carries a lot of school wounds, and they did something, I think they hurt somebody, not terribly, but it was still alarming. We were trying to figure out what was going on, why they were mad. Yeah. And one of this, I kind of like stopped asking at this point, trying to ask what happened, because it just shut down. I was like, and I remember one thing they really like is like going for a walk and get some candy. So I was like, all right, let's go for a walk, get some candy. Nothing to do with like, we're getting a candy so you can tell me about this conflict, And there were some questions from staff. I was like, are we really just kind of letting them get away with it? But not, I think they were just processing. Anyway, the whole point was that we went on this walk and got a lot of candy. I should probably ask the school back for some money. But anyway, we went on a walk, and it was just, we started talking about so many different things, and it was just building relationship again, because I've already had this similar reaction from them last year, but I think we sort of just haven't talked in a while, so we talked, and then they just let me in on what was going on. And so the next time that something similar happened, I could ask this kid, okay, what happened and what were you feeling? And they were able to say it, because now they knew that I wasn't going to, react in a way that was, even telling them that I'm not going to react is something not enough. You got to show it. You got to show that action. So that's the one thing I was reminded of.
We have 10 more minutes, and I'm wondering what from this, what you shared, what from what your centers do, would you want families to do? Because we have so many people in the audience that are just parents and not SDE facilitators in a school center, but they are at home. What would you want them to know, to take from you, or from what anyone said here?
I think what Annie said was really important about just letting it happen sometimes, or letting the tears flow. Like, I don't know how many people have multiple children, but sometimes kids need that space to have a reaction, to get in a fight, and then to realize, oh, wait, I still love this person, even though I'm really mad at them. And if we rush in as parents and be like, nope, now you got to apologize, that could interrupt that process. And the kid doesn't ever get to realize what they're feeling inside. They're just being told, now you have to apologize and make up because you're supposed to love this person. I think it's really important for them to be able to feel their feelings from a very young age, and just kind of be like, okay, it's not the end of the world. And it's also not something that somebody over me is going to fix right away. I think as parents, we can encourage them to fix things, and invite them to apologize or to resolve the conflict. But I think it's more important that they start to understand that process inside themselves, and to figure out what's needed. Okay, I'm really mad, so maybe I'm going to go take a break. I'm really mad, so I can't apologize right now. I don't want to apologize right now. And for that to be okay, I think that's really important.
I always feel weird saying what parents should do because I'm not a parent. But I think slowing down, sort of the way that Crystal was talking about, letting the tears flow in, is really huge. We live in such a hyperactive society. Things always need to be done, and I can understand where it's just you have no time for it. And so, with a grain of salt, take that advice. Find time. And also, I think maybe tools are tools. Can't have one that's going to work every time. Breathing helps me, but meditation, I hate meditation. So yeah, find the right one, and let your kids talk a lot. It's self-directed. This is for them. They got to figure themselves out. And sometimes we talk too much, ask too many questions. We ask too many questions, and it's like, oh, slow the fuck down. One question every 10 minutes might be enough.
Yeah, I think another common place we go as grown-ups or as schooled minds or whatever is we moralize issues that don't need to be moralized, right? There doesn't need to be a good and a bad. It can both exist. And that especially, I think, can be a hard lesson to figure out supporting early childhood, because in that developmental range, they're thinking good and bad, right? So much of the content, the media they're consuming is about good guys versus bad guys. They're playing good guys versus bad guys, right? So we can, even if we know better, go to that place more easily because we're constantly talking good guys, bad guys, right? But So trying really hard not to make a moral issue out of a developmental one. And then I think something else that can happen sometimes in unschooling families is a total hands-off approach, where maybe depending on the age of who you're working with, or depending on the power structures of who they're interacting with, if it's neighborhood kids who aren't unschooled, things like that, if there's a more conventional hierarchy of power, they might still need our help. So staying close, right? Like, especially when new groups are coming together, keeping your ear out. Like I said, like sometimes if I hear it, I just kind of attune to it without involving myself. But just staying aware and present can be helpful too.
Thank you. I'm curious if any of the young people that joined the SDE weekend is still here, and if yes, would you want to share something with us, because we keep talking about you. So if anyone is here, just open your mic and say what you appreciate or what you want the other adults to know about conflict resolutions in SDE spaces. And then we move on to the parents if they want to say something. Moving on to the parents, or whoever has something to add, like what you would do in the chat. You can just open your mic and have it as a conversation. Let's end with this. What do you do if a parent or a child from your community says, what you're doing, what we are doing is not enough. We need to introduce punishments, or we need more consequences. But when they think about consequences, they actually think about punishments. And how do you rethink and make the difference between punishments and the natural consequences?
I mean, we did have a conversation with the kids and say, what are some consequences that we want to impose? So I think that's one instance where it's maybe okay to have punishments. They were like, well, if we get to this point, like bullying, they were talking about bullying, we're gonna take tablets away, or we'll ask them to not come to school one day. And to me, that felt like, okay, that's really punitive, but it was also something that they agreed on and said, this is what we want to do. So yeah, that was one example.
We had something kind of similar. It's like the kids felt really like this person shouldn't be here. And without trying to say they're being, what was the word? When a kid can't come to school anymore, I forgot. But we did agree that it would not be safe for them to be expelled. Well, the other one, the short-term one. Suspended, yeah. Because we didn't want to use that, but in the end, it is kind of like that, because they, for us, it still felt punitive, but yeah, it was about listening to them first, and then explaining what the conflict resolution process would look like. It's not just they're suspended and then when they come back, what happens, So, yeah, they're out, but now we got to talk about how we can deal with the resolution part of it. And in this case, I think we're just not the center for that kid either. And so, but the conversation of how to deal with that, yeah, it's hard. And again, it's everybody's different. I don't have a good endpoint on that. Yeah.
Any thoughts on this?
I don't know. I think Crystal and David said it well. And also I want to say too, something that maybe we haven't touched on yet that I think we all would agree on, knowing your centers and knowing your work. We try, like, keep it light, keep it humorous when you can, right? Like this is like conflict that we're talking is going on, ongoing, or has escalated, but like so often we can avoid conflict just by like not making a conflict. Philly ALC shared with us what they have, and I forget what they call it, but I think David's on the call, maybe he could tell us, but like a D20 consequence thing, right? Like, and they're kind of silly and they're kind of funny and they make you laugh. And especially when it's like a grown-up and invented conflict, like something I'm having a problem with in the center, whether it's like, a boundary that's been crossed, but it's not a major one. Like, let's keep it light. Let's keep it funny. Let's bring some attention to it and see if we can get it out of the way without making it a bigger thing. I don't know if that answers that last question, but that was just a thought I wanted to share that I don't think had come up yet.
I know we may go a few minutes over time, but I'm asking you this. This is an invitation. So we'll have time for 3 more answers for a question that I do not know. What question would you have loved to receive and you did not, and you would want to answer related to conflicts? And this is an open invitation. If you want to share something as last thoughts, this is it. But you take it or leave it.
Okay, I did want to say something about trauma and conflict. And I think, because we were talking about school-based trauma, and, there are going to be kids who come with a lot of trauma, and they're not always going to be able to work through the conflict in a way that, we really want them to. And so there's definitely boundaries that we have to have when a kid comes to the center to understand, okay, this kid may be reacting out of some deep trauma that we can't fix. And, there needs to be bigger resources around this kid to help them, to support them in that. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind, is that sometimes, like, there are going to be kids who come and are going to learn and understand and be able to navigate conflict. But there are some kids who it's just going to feel like the end of the world and they won't know what to do. And we can't always get them into a spot where they do know what to do and they feel confident about resolving conflicts.
I personally don't have anything to add.
Okay. Then on this note, we end the last panel of the SDE Weekend 2023. English fails me right now. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for the wonderful comments in the chat.